Hi, I am a 24-year-old woman living with my younger sister, Amanda, who's 22. After our parents passed away a few years ago, we moved into their house and have been splitting expenses ever since. It's been challenging navigating our relationship while managing the day-to-day realities of life, but somehow we've made it work, or so I thought. I work two jobs, one as a barista in the mornings and another as a server at a restaurant in the evenings. My dream is to save up for a professional certification that will help me advance my career, but that's meant sticking to a tight budget. Amanda, on the other hand, works part-time and spends like she has a trust fund. Designer bags, trendy outfits, and expensive makeup, she always seems to have something new. I've learned not to judge, even when it means picking up a larger share of the household groceries, because she forgot to contribute. For me, my wardrobe is personal. I'm not into fast fashion. Every piece of clothing I own has been carefully chosen. Some items were bought on sale after weeks of saving, while others are gifts with sentimental value. My work uniforms, for example, aren't just clothes, they're essential for my job. I've even invested in a few rare vintage pieces that I'm proud to have in my collection. Amanda and I have always had a bit of friction when it comes to boundaries. She has this habit of borrowing my things without asking: makeup, shoes, even books. It's annoying, but I've let it slide more times than I can count. Recently, though, she's been escalating. I've come home to find my favorite dress wrinkled in a pile on her floor, or a pair of boots missing entirely, only to spot them on her Instagram later. One night, after a grueling double shift, I walked through the door and immediately felt like something was off. My room looked empty. My closet doors were wide open, and a sinking feeling hit me as I stepped closer. Half of my clothes were gone. My work uniforms, my vintage finds, even the dress I'd planned to wear to a friend's wedding in 2 weeks. Gone. Amanda was sitting in the living room, scrolling on her phone with a big grin. When I confronted her, she looked completely unfazed and told me she'd finally done something good by donating my clothes to a local charity. She said she'd noticed I wasn't wearing half of them and figured they'd be better off with people in need. I was stunned. She hadn't asked, hadn't even thought to check if I needed those items. I told her those clothes weren't hers to give away, but she shrugged and said they were just sitting there. When I asked where she'd taken them, she refused to give me any details. After locking myself in my room to calm down, I started doing the math. Some of the pieces she gave away were expensive. My work uniforms alone would cost hundreds to replace, not to mention the vintage items. Altogether, the value easily came out to over $2,000. But it wasn't just about the money. I'd worked so hard to build a wardrobe that fit my style and needs. Losing it felt like losing a part of myself. When I confronted Amanda again, she waved off my concerns. She called me materialistic and said I should be proud she'd done something charitable. It was infuriating. I pointed out that she'd just bought a new outfit earlier that day, one of those overpriced trendy sets she loves, but she dismissed it as completely different. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I started calling every local donation center I could find, trying to track down my clothes. Some places were helpful, but others had already distributed the items, and there was no way to get them back. Each phone call chipped away at my hope. By morning, I was emotionally drained and furious. Amanda didn't seem to care. She went about her day as if nothing had happened, even showing off her new purchases on Instagram. I couldn't believe the audacity. She hadn't apologized or even tried to make things right. If anything, she seemed proud of herself, acting like she was some sort of hero for getting rid of clutter. That's when it hit me: Amanda wasn't going to learn anything from this unless she experienced the consequences firsthand. She needed to understand what it felt like to lose something you cared about, something you'd worked hard for. I wasn't sure how, but I decided then and there that I was done letting her walk all over me. As I sat in my room, staring at my half-empty closet, my eyes landed on the locked storage chest in the corner. It had been sitting there for years, holding items I didn't use often, but couldn't bear to part with. In that moment, I felt a spark of an idea, a way to turn the tables and make Amanda realize just how badly she'd crossed the line. Looking back, this was the beginning of a turning point in my relationship with Amanda. I didn't know it yet, but what started as frustration and betrayal would soon set off a chain of events I never could have predicted. Update 1. Once I decided to teach Amanda a lesson, I knew exactly where to start. While she was out with her friends, I went into her room and began meticulously cataloging every piece of clothing in her wardrobe. Amanda was obsessed with fashion, so her closet was overflowing with trendy pieces, designer shoes, and accessories she'd flaunted on social media. I wasn't just going to sell her clothes, I was going to start with the ones she loved the most. Her designer handbag collection was the first thing I listed. She had saved up for months to buy those bags, only to neglect them once she moved on to her next fashion obsession. I set up pseudonymous accounts on multiple online platforms, using alternate emails to ensure she couldn't trace the sales back to me. To keep it discreet, I priced the items attractively, low enough to sell quickly, but high enough to make her feel the sting when she found out. Within days, the sales started rolling in. Her limited edition handbag was the first to go, followed by a pair of boots she'd only worn twice. I carefully packaged each item and shipped them out, keeping every receipt and transaction record for my own peace of mind. Amanda didn't notice anything at first. Her room was such a mess that even I struggled to navigate her wardrobe, so it wasn't surprising that she didn't realize her favorite pieces were disappearing. But then, one morning, I overheard her frantically rummaging through her closet, muttering about how she couldn't find her favorite dress. I stayed quiet, pretending to be engrossed in my breakfast as she tore through her room. When she finally confronted me, I mirrored her dismissive attitude from before. I feigned ignorance and told her she was probably just misplacing things. "You've been so busy lately," I said casually. "Maybe you left them at a friend's house?" She looked frustrated but didn't press further. Over the next 2 weeks, I made nearly $1,000 selling Amanda's wardrobe. I transferred the money into a secret savings account, earmarking it for my certification course. Watching the balance grow felt like reclaiming a piece of what Amanda had taken from me. By the time Amanda realized her wardrobe was disappearing, it was too late. She stormed into the kitchen one evening, accusing me of sabotaging her. I kept my cool, asking her why she cared so much about a few missing items when she hadn't cared about my clothes being donated. She didn't have an answer, just more excuses about how she needed her clothes for work and social events. Her hypocrisy was on full display. Here was someone who had dismissed my concerns about losing work uniforms worth thousands of dollars, now losing her mind over a few missing dresses. It was almost laughable, but I held my ground, refusing to admit anything. Amanda decided to escalate the situation by calling our extended family. She painted herself as the victim, telling everyone that I was ruining her life out of spite. The family was divided. Some of our relatives sided with me, saying I was justified after what Amanda had done. Others believed I'd gone too far, arguing that I should have just let it go and moved on. To clear my head, I turned to Reddit, posting anonymously about the situation. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments flooded in, validating my actions and encouraging me to stand my ground. People shared their own stories of dealing with entitled family members, and their advice gave me the clarity I needed to keep going. Meanwhile, Amanda was in full panic mode. She started calling donation centers, hoping to track down her missing clothes. Of course, she didn't find anything. By the time she realized her efforts were futile, the stress was clearly getting to her. She started skipping her part-time shifts, and her Instagram posts became less frequent. No more outfit of the day photos or hauls from her favorite stores. When she did post, it was obvious she was recycling old outfits, something she used to criticize other people for doing. Her friends, who had always been part of her trendy social circle, seemed to notice too. Slowly, they stopped commenting on her posts, and Amanda began withdrawing from the activities she used to love. Watching her deal with the consequences of her actions felt strangely satisfying, but I knew this wasn't over. Amanda wasn't the type to back down easily, and I could sense she was planning her next move. Still, I had no intention of returning the money or confessing to what I'd done. She needed to understand that actions have consequences, and this was the only way I could make her see that. For now, I stayed one step ahead, knowing that the next confrontation was just around the corner. Update 2. Amanda wasn't about to let things go. I should have expected it. After days of sulking and scouring donation centers for her missing wardrobe, she switched tactics. One evening, she cornered me in the hallway, threatening to sell my remaining belongings. She made a show of eyeing my work laptop and other items I kept out in the open, as if daring me to stop her. I didn't wait for her to follow through. The next day, I stopped by a hardware store after work and picked up a heavy-duty lock for my bedroom door. When I got home, I installed it immediately, double-checking the screws and making sure it was secure. My valuables, electronics, important documents, and even a few remaining clothing items went into a locked storage chest I kept in the corner of my room. Amanda's frustration was obvious. She tried jiggling the new lock, loudly complaining about how ridiculous I was being. When she realized I wasn't going to engage, she stomped off and slammed her door. The tension between us hit a boiling point that weekend. Amanda broke down, yelling about how I'd ruined her life. She blamed me for everything: her missing wardrobe, her strained finances, even her falling out with friends. She spent hours on the phone, venting to anyone who would listen, but the sympathy she was fishing for didn't seem to come through. Her friends, who had once hyped up her every Instagram post, were now pulling away. Amanda's inability to keep up with her usual fashion-forward image made her less of a fixture in her social circle. She began skipping work shifts, claiming she couldn't bear to face her coworkers in her boring recycled outfits. It wasn't long before our extended family got involved. Amanda called for a family meeting, claiming we needed intervention to address the toxic environment in the house. I agreed to go, curious to see how she planned to spin the story. The meeting, held at our aunt's house, quickly devolved into chaos. Amanda presented herself as the victim, focusing on how I had sold her wardrobe out of spite. She conveniently left out the part where she donated my clothes without asking. When I brought it up, she deflected, saying it was completely different because she'd done it for charity. Voices were raised and accusations flew back and forth. Amanda refused to apologize or even acknowledge her actions, doubling down instead. Some family members sided with her, saying I'd gone too far, while others defended me, arguing that Amanda had crossed a line first. By the end of the meeting, no resolution had been reached, and we left in worse shape than before. Amanda's financial struggles became more apparent in the weeks that followed. With her part-time paycheck stretched thin and no money to replace her wardrobe, she started borrowing clothes from friends. At first, they obliged, but as Amanda's reputation for entitlement grew, the offers dried up. She returned home one evening wearing an outfit that clearly didn't fit her properly, her embarrassment written all over her face. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Amanda threatened legal action. She claimed she could sue me for theft and demanded I return the money I'd made from selling her clothes. I didn't take the threat seriously. She had no evidence to back up her claims, and I'd kept meticulous records of every transaction, just in case. The situation gained traction online when I posted another update on Reddit. Thousands of users chimed in, offering advice and support. Many suggested I establish stricter boundaries moving forward, while others encouraged me to stay firm and not let guilt cloud my judgment. Their words reinforced my resolve. Amanda, meanwhile, tried a different tactic. She started bringing up our parents, saying they'd be disappointed in how I was treating her. It was a low blow, but it didn't have the effect she'd hoped for. I knew our parents would have wanted us to respect each other's boundaries, something Amanda had failed to do from the start. To my surprise, a distant cousin reached out during this time. She'd heard about the drama and offered her support, even suggesting she could help if Amanda pursued legal action. Her message was a reminder that not everyone in the family had been swayed by Amanda's narrative. As Amanda's desperation grew, She tried reaching out to more people for help, but her efforts were met with rejection. Borrowing clothes, money, or sympathy didn't come easily when you'd burned so many bridges. Despite the growing tension, I refused to back down. Returning the money or apologizing wasn't an option, not when Amanda had shown no remorse for what she'd done. Every step I'd taken was calculated, a direct response to her complete disregard for my boundaries. This wasn't just about clothes anymore. It was about standing up for myself and showing Amanda that her actions had consequences. No matter how much pressure she tried to put on me, I wasn't going to let her off the hook. The fallout was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Update 3. Amanda hit rock bottom not long after her threats and family meeting failed to go her way. With no money to replace her wardrobe and her usual resources exhausted, she started showing up to events in mismatched, ill-fitting hand-me-downs. She couldn't borrow from friends anymore, her requests were either ignored or politely declined. Even her social media accounts, once full of trendy outfit posts, became noticeably quiet. When she did post, the comments were sparse. Her friends clearly weren't as invested in her life as they used to be. Around this time, I decided to put the money I'd earned from selling her wardrobe to good use. I registered for the professional certification course I'd been saving for, covering the fees in full. It felt like a small but satisfying victory. I didn't flaunt it or announce it to Amanda. I simply took the next step in my career, knowing that the funds had been reclaimed in a way that mattered. Amanda, however, wasn't done creating drama. One evening, she took to social media and posted a long, emotional rant accusing me of abusing her and ruining her life. She framed herself as a victim, claiming I'd left her with nothing and made her the laughingstock of her social circle. The post gained traction among her friends, but it didn't take long for people to piece together the full story. Screenshots of my earlier Reddit updates began circulating, and some of Amanda's friends who'd previously taken her side started commenting with their own opinions. A few even unfollowed her after learning what she'd done to my clothes. The backlash was swift. People called her out for her entitlement and questioned how she could cry foul after starting the entire mess. Her behavior didn't sit well with our extended family, either. While some relatives had defended her initially, her public meltdown and refusal to accept responsibility pushed them away. A few even reached out to me privately, apologizing for doubting my side of the story. One uncle told me he was cutting ties with Amanda until she figured out how to be an adult. The tension between us escalated until Amanda made a decision that surprised no one. She moved out. She claimed she couldn't live in a house where she was constantly attacked and disrespected. I didn't argue. In fact, I helped her pack her things, making sure she only took what actually belonged to her. She found a small room to rent with a coworker, but it was clear her new living situation wasn't as comfortable as she was used to. Once she left, the house felt like a different place. The constant arguments, passive-aggressive remarks, and tension disappeared. For the first time in months, I could come home after work and truly relax. I spent the next few weeks reorganizing and deep cleaning, reclaiming the space as my own. Amanda's apology came shortly after she moved out, but it wasn't what I'd hoped for. She sent a text blaming stress for her actions and claimed she never meant to hurt me. It felt more like an excuse than a genuine attempt to make things right. I responded with a neutral but firm message, telling her I couldn't reconcile with her until she took full accountability for what she'd done. In the midst of all this, an unexpected opportunity arose. One of the donation centers I'd contacted during my search for my clothes reached out to me. They'd heard about my Reddit posts and wanted to collaborate on an awareness campaign about respecting boundaries and making intentional donations. It was surreal, but I agreed to help, providing insights and tips for their social media outreach. Meanwhile, Amanda's financial struggles continued. She picked up extra shifts at work, trying to make ends meet, but her part-time salary wasn't enough to cover her spending habits. She stopped buying new clothes altogether and started borrowing items from coworkers, which only added to the gossip surrounding her. As life settled down, I found myself embracing a simpler lifestyle. With Amanda gone, I didn't feel the need to hold on to things out of fear they'd be taken or damaged. I donated a few items I no longer needed and focused on creating a space that felt calm and organized. It wasn't just about minimalism. It was about valuing respect and boundaries over material possessions. Amanda eventually started therapy. A mutual family member mentioned it to me, saying she was trying to work through her entitlement issues and unresolved grief over our parents' deaths. While I was glad to hear she was taking steps to improve herself, I wasn't ready to let my guard down just yet. Change takes time, and I wanted to see if her efforts were genuine. As for me, my story gained traction online. My Reddit updates turned into a bit of a saga, with users regularly asking for updates and offering support. Some even joked about turning it into a book or movie. It was strange being thrust into the spotlight, but the overwhelming positivity reminded me that I wasn't alone in my experiences. Looking back, the fallout taught me a lot about boundaries, accountability, and the importance of standing up for myself. Amanda and I may never fully repair our relationship, but I've learned that family doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and let people face the consequences of their actions. Update 4. A few weeks after Amanda moved out, I started hearing whispers from family members about her latest steps. Apparently, she'd started therapy. My cousin mentioned it in passing, saying Amanda was trying to work on her entitlement and boundary issues. It seemed like a positive move, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't ready to trust her intentions. Then Amanda reached out directly. She texted me, asking to meet in person to clear the air. I stared at the message for a while before replying. After months of chaos, it felt too soon to face her. I wasn't convinced she was ready to take accountability, and I didn't want to walk into another round of excuses or deflections. But the family had other ideas. Within days, I started getting calls and messages urging me to reconcile with Amanda. Family is all we have, they reminded me repeatedly. It was exhausting. The pressure was intense, but I stood my ground. I told them I'd only meet Amanda if she admitted fault and offered a genuine apology. Otherwise, there was no point. Eventually, Amanda agreed to my terms, and we scheduled a meeting. She showed up late, looking nervous and slightly disheveled. It was clear this wasn't easy for her. When we sat down, she started with a tearful apology, saying she regretted everything she'd done. For the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful. I didn't let her off the hook, though. I pressed her to explain why she'd thought it was okay to donate my clothes without asking. She hesitated but finally admitted that she'd seen it as a way to teach me a lesson. She thought I had so much compared to her and believed I wouldn't miss the clothes. Hearing her justification made my anger resurface. It was exactly the entitled mindset that had caused all this in the first place. Her apology might have been heartfelt, but her reasoning confirmed that I'd been right to stand my ground. Then Amanda dropped another bombshell. She asked if she could move back into the house temporarily, citing financial struggles. She claimed she couldn't afford her current rent and needed some time to get back on her feet. I didn't hesitate to respond. I told her firmly that she needed to prove she'd truly changed before I could trust her again. Moving back in wasn't an option. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I had to prioritize my peace and boundaries. Amanda seemed taken aback, but she didn't argue. Instead, she opened up about her therapy sessions, saying they'd helped her see how much of her behavior stemmed from unresolved grief over our parents' deaths. She talked about how she'd used material things to cope, and how that mindset had fueled her entitlement. While I could empathize with her grief, I couldn't excuse her actions. I told her as much, making it clear that therapy was a good step, but not a free pass for what she'd done. After the meeting, I turned to Reddit for advice. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, encouraging me to maintain my boundaries. Many users reminded me that guilt shouldn't override self-respect, and that I wasn't obligated to let Amanda back into my life on her terms. In the weeks that followed, Amanda started taking concrete steps to turn her life around. She announced to the family that she was cutting back on spending and had taken a second job to recover financially. Her social media posts shifted from attention-seeking rants to updates about her progress in therapy and work. It was a start, but I kept my distance. I appreciated her efforts, but I wasn't ready to fully let her back into my life. I'd learned the hard way that trust takes time to rebuild, and I wasn't going to rush the process. Despite everything, I found myself reflecting on our shared grief. Losing our parents had been a devastating blow, and I realized I'd buried my own feelings to focus on survival. But grief didn't excuse bad behavior, and it certainly didn't justify violating someone else's boundaries. As for my own journey, I continued to focus on building a life that brought me peace. I made a point to avoid clutter and embrace a minimalist lifestyle. It wasn't about the things I owned, but about valuing respect and harmony in my space. Amanda and I stayed in occasional contact, exchanging updates through family members or brief texts. She seemed to be making genuine progress, but I remained cautious. Trusting her again would take time, and I wasn't in a hurry to force a relationship that wasn't ready to heal. For now, I've chosen to focus on myself, my goals, and the lessons I've learned from this experience. Boundaries aren't just important, they're essential. Sometimes holding firm is the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the people around you. Update 5. Over the next 6 months, Amanda showed surprising progress. She continued with therapy and started making amends with the family members she'd alienated during her spiral. Slowly but steadily, she reached out to people she'd hurt, offering apologies that seemed genuine. Family gatherings became less tense, with Amanda actively working to rebuild those connections. Meanwhile, I hit a major milestone of my own. I completed the professional certification course I'd enrolled in with the funds from selling Amanda's wardrobe. It wasn't just a step forward in my career, it was a validation of all the hard work I'd put in to reclaim control over my life. With the certification in hand, I secured a higher-paying job that came with better hours and benefits. For the first time in a long time, I began thinking about the future, investments, travel, and other plans I'd put off for years. Around the same time, Amanda surprised me with a handwritten letter. In it, she opened up about how therapy had changed her perspective. She admitted to realizing how entitled her actions had been and how much damage she'd caused. She also thanked me for standing firm, saying it had forced her to confront the consequences of her behavior. While the letter was heartfelt, I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. I appreciated her growth, but trust doesn't rebuild overnight. I decided to maintain boundaries while keeping an open mind about her progress. Amanda continued to stabilize her life. She moved into a modest apartment with a roommate and began managing her finances more responsibly. For the first time, she was living within her means, paying bills on time, and even setting aside some savings. It was a far cry from the Amanda who couldn't resist splurging on every new trend. Eventually, we started interacting more regularly. We met for coffee a few times and attended family events without the tension that had defined our relationship for so long. I laid out clear boundaries for any future interactions, making it clear that my space and property were off limits unless explicitly shared. Amanda respected these terms, which gave me some hope that she was truly changing. Then came a moment I hadn't anticipated. Amanda posted a public apology on social media. In a lengthy post, she took full responsibility for her actions and shared how therapy had helped her grow. She didn't frame herself as a victim or make excuses. Instead, she acknowledged the hurt she'd caused and expressed gratitude for the lessons she'd learned. The post shocked our friends and family, many of whom reached out to me with words of support. I updated Reddit about Amanda's progress, and the response was a mix of encouragement and caution. While most users applauded her growth, they reminded me to remain vigilant about maintaining boundaries. Their advice aligned with my own instincts. I was optimistic but cautious. Amanda also took an unexpected step to show goodwill. She went through the remaining items in her wardrobe and donated several pieces to the same charity where she'd sent my clothes. It felt like a symbolic gesture, one that underscored her commitment to making things right. Not long after, Amanda and I decided to host a small family dinner together. It was our way of signaling a truce and showing the family that we were both working to mend our relationship. The evening went smoothly, with laughter and shared stories replacing the tension that had once defined our interactions. Toward the end of the night, Amanda surprised me again. She offered to pay me back for some of the money I'd earned from selling her wardrobe. I declined, telling her that the lesson she'd learned was more valuable than any repayment. She smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no tension between us, just mutual understanding. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized how much this situation had taught both of us. For Amanda, it was a lesson in accountability and respecting boundaries. For me, it was a reminder of the importance of standing firm and not letting guilt cloud my judgment. I ended my final Reddit update by thanking everyone who'd followed the journey and offered their support. Sharing the story online had been an unexpected source of validation and encouragement, and it was humbling to see how many people resonated with the lessons we'd learned. At the heart of it all, this experience reminded me that even the messiest conflicts can lead to growth, as long as the people involved are willing to face their mistakes and put in the work to change.